Hey, Bellator Society, this is Tracy and Fran, and we are coming live on Facebook and hopefully Twitch. We have had some technical issues today, so if you've hung around and you're joining us, we are so thankful and appreciative. Thank you for watching us. This month we are talking about male and female. He created them, and we have an awesome guest on today who's been so gracious and has hung around through all of our technical glitches. Her name is Rachel Balducci, and she's from Augusta, and she is an author and a lecturer, and she has a TV show on Catholic TV called The Gist. She's a wife and mother. She has 5 boys and 1 girl. And we're actually talking to her today about her book, her latest book that she just wrote called Overcommitted. So hello, Rachel. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited that you're here too, because Rachel, you might not know this, but I have been preparing for this interview for like 15 years. I am such a big fan of your blog, Testosterone. That's how I originally got to know you. And like, you don't know us, but there's so many of us in the world who like know you because of your blog. And, you know, remember when you hit was it your van or your Suburban at Sonic? Hit the mirror. Like, I mean, I felt that. Your laundry skills. I know all about that, and I just want to share more of you. So we're so happy that you agreed to.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for letting me be here with y'all. I'm really excited.
So let's jump in and ask. You are the mama of 5 boys, a goodly amount of gentlemen, and 1 sweet little girl. What's the difference? What have you noticed? If you could pick one thing that would be like difference in parenting the boys versus the girls, what would you say it is?
So one thing I've realized about Isabel is she is so much more sort of in tune with me. And it's just really funny, you know, since we switched, the world has shut down, and all of a sudden I went, like, on a Friday, I was full-time professor up at the university. My kids would go to school, and by like Tuesday morning, that had all changed. I think I had a 2-week time where we like prepared for that. I think it was pretty much overnight. Anyway, I of course like burst into tears on one of the first days and hid in my closet for a little bit, and it was yucky and terrible. And she came up to me one day when I was like just kind of hunched over, crying and overwhelmed, and put her arm around me and said, "We're going to make it. It's going to be okay." And that was precious. You know, before we had Isabel, when we had our 5th son, I really felt like that was, you know, the family God had given us, and it was perfect and wonderful. And so having a daughter has been a blessing, but there's a lot to love about boys too. So, you know, I love them both. And I love, like you say, that, you know, he created them, like learning to really embrace who God made each of the sexes to be, and what we bring to complement each other is always so beautiful. So it's really been fun seeing that now, you know, kind of like later in the game of the mothering gig to have this daughter come along. I was like, wait, what? That's different, you know, like all the time. So it's been really fun.
Oh, I love it. I love it. You always share such beautiful insight. Again, you haven't been on your blog in a while, but I think you just restarted.
I just restarted. And last year I tried to start, and I had been hacked, and it turned into this whole endeavor that took months. So now I'm back and getting there, and really just trying to get back in the habit. I think I had just become an Instagram person. And, you know, a few weeks ago, I was like, I don't like not using writing to process. I still write a weekly column for our diocesan paper. So I get to kind of do that. And then, as you ladies both know, the older your children get, the lot less fodder there is for public consumption. You know,
just the cute, quippy stuff.
Yes. And even the cute, quippy stuff, I could share it with you two, but sometimes it's something that moms of young kids can't appreciate, or you don't want to throw a story out there for some random stranger to scold you about. Oh, I'll never forget when I was blogging at Faith and Family Live, and I know this person meant well, but I was talking about how much milk we went through in a week. And I decided one week to buy the boys each their own gallon of milk. So I bought, 5 gallons of milk, and this was your milk to chip away at. And somebody was like, that's hoggish. Well, it's actually blah, blah. No, that's ridiculous. And 4 separate times I was like, leaving you the opportunity to back down. And, they were, and, you have a few instances like that happen where all of a sudden you feel like, I'm not going to throw my kids out there to be judged by people, especially older kids, where it's like, it's your story to tell. I'm not here to just share it all with the world,
That is such a good point. And it's something that Tracy and I talk about quite often because we both have teenagers. I have a very little one, but like we have these older kids who have their own lives, and what is allowed to be shared? What will they feel comfortable with? Because it's still like kind of my story, but their story, and it's a very delicate balance to keep everybody like on the up and up. And fortunately, my kids are not on social media, but man, I am, and I would hate to be a kid on social media right now.
Yeah.
It hurts. Like people say things and I don't think they think. I mean, I want to follow the spiritual masters and think that no one really means to be a terrible person, but sometimes they really are.
Yeah, it's weird. Social media creates this weird vacuum where people say things, horrible things that they would never say in real life to people, and so it's really tough. But I like what you said too. It is like mothering. It's like we have our kids and they have their story, but then we have our story in the midst of it. And that was a lot of the kind of writing I did and still do, is like where I'm at in the journey of what's going on with my job as a mom, especially, working my way through helping them. And then how am I reacting to all of that? It's important. I mean, and those are important stories to share because, like we were talking about, just, encouraging other women. To me, that's, once I made it through having those 4 boys in 5 years, and again, that's not what I thought motherhood was going to look like, nothing bad. It was way better than I could have dreamed. And I would have probably limited myself to after we had our first son, Paul and I both looked at each other and said, if God doesn't send us any other kids, that would be okay. It's a blessing. Yeah. So it's not like a numbers game, but just this feeling of like, okay, Lord, you sent me another baby. I trust in you. And wow, you knew that I could do that, which is so awesome, but it was like, that was not an easy season for me. And once I kind of made it through that, and then, we waited 5.5 years and had one last baby, Henry. And then Isabel was this surprise. And then that was really the hard season, because then it was like, I did this reset with these 2 younger ones. And just making it through. And it's like, I want women to know, just because it's hard right now doesn't mean it's always going to be that way, and you can do it. It's worth it. That's kind of my takeaway.
And that is where I met Rachel Balducci when I was drowning, and she was the woman who had made it to the shore. And I was like, see, you can live through this. And so anyway, you just always have so much beautiful insight to share. And we do want to jump into your new book, Overcommitted. And I think maybe a little segue there is part of maybe the editing of your life that you've done is a little bit of social media editing. Like I think you said, I forget if it was on your blog or recently that you had taken social media off your phone. Like yes. You edited that part out. Genius. Like that's what needs to happen.
Yeah. And it was, it felt like such a huge deal. And, and I feel like God's doing a lot of work in all of us in this season where we're kind of stuck home and having a lot of time to be inside of our own heads for better or for worse. But like for me, he's really shining light on some areas that I think I need to get some healing in or some regrouping. But, I had found I had this one week where all of a sudden, I was trying to get all this affirmation from social media because probably I wasn't having the kind of interactions in real life that really feed me. Right. Being in the store and having a friendly interaction with someone, running into friends, walking through the neighborhood and seeing people. And I found I was on social media feeling hurt and left out, that maybe my stuff wasn't getting liked. And it was ridiculous. It was so out of balance. And so I was talking to my spiritual director, and it was so embarrassing too, that we had this whole session that was all about my feelings about that. And that's how I realized that it was disordered. And so I took it off the phone, and then it wasn't I feel like I can't just delete it and walk away, because when I'm doing well emotionally, I love it. And I have a ton of fun on there, but learning how to be in tune with, if you're not doing well right now, don't seek approval and affirmation there, because it's not real life, And so that was huge. And it took me a couple of days to kind of dig myself out of that. And then I got through it, and so it's like the comings and goings of that. I'm not saying just because I did it and now I feel better, it's never going to happen again. But being in tune with, I'm in a funk. What is contributing to this? Oh my goodness. If it's just like an app on my phone, delete it,
Delete it, yes.
Great. Yeah.
I feel like every Lent, my older kids always give up some form of social media, and it's like every Lent they are so much more delightful. We have good conversation. Even yesterday, my husband went to get us some takeout, and he took our two older daughters, and he was commenting at dinner, like, one of them forgot her phone, and he was like, we had the best conversation. I mean, and we talked about it with our family, and my daughter was like, I know, I just forgot it. I didn't mean to forget it. And we were like, but see how good it is when you don't have that distraction. You can actually be present and enjoy real conversation, and then everyone feels better, you know?
And it's crazy how, like, just by deleting that app, it was like this thing that I didn't have to be checking. And so all of a sudden there was just like no need to feel like I had to be checking stuff. And I talk about that a lot in the book too, because, that's one of the things we have to really consider. Like when we're feeling overwhelmed and we're feeling like life's chaotic, for me, I realize when my brain feels like in a, on the go all the time, it might not be because I have too many things going on as much as how I use my time. So like this feeling of like, pick it up,
Mm-hmm.
and that was one of the things I realized, like in this weird time of being home, standing in the kitchen, trying to get homeschooling done for the day, about to be interrupted, that's a great, great time to get in the habit of, well, I got 30 seconds. I'll check Instagram. I got another 30. I'll do that again, and so it was kind of like, that's not helping me at all to do that, and then the bigger picture in normal life is getting a handle on those small things. Like somehow the little things can become big. Like Facebook can be this giant time suck, or Instagram, or whatever other social media, when it really should. And I in the book, I share this story that I heard years ago about, that concept of having a jar and you fill it. And I want all these things to fit in this jar, and the jar is our time. If I put the big things in first, the medium size and the little and the sand, it will all fit in there. If I start with the little things and then I try to get the big things in at the end, there's no room for it. So it's like prioritizing prayer, being aware of my family's needs, and then kind of like being aware of our schedule. And then it's like, okay, here's a little bit of time I have that I can devote to this. Instead of like, if you flip that around, that's why we feel burned out, I think, is like we have disorder in our schedule.
Right.
Absolutely. And I love that you brought up the word order, and ordering your day and putting things first, basically. And I love in your book, I think it was on page 42, where you said that you had once heard this moment, and this right ordering, the first thing you wake up. You said you heard it described as those moments before the devil knows that you're awake. Man, I underlined that, and I practiced it this morning, and it's so true. Like, it's just that breath you take to give the day to the Lord, and to orient yourself to what he wants for that day. And we have a friend who is one of our contributors, who says that every single morning in that time, in that little space, she says she just asks the question, Jesus, how are you going to surprise me today?
Nice.
And I love that. Just have a touch point. It doesn't have to be that question. It doesn't have to be that. But like, what is the thing you say? Like, we know what we say to our spouse first thing in the morning. When you see that little person come into the kitchen in the morning, the first thing you say to him. But what do you say to God?
Mm-hmm.
And I love that you have encapsulated that moment before you open your eyes, where the devil isn't filling your head with the things, all the noise, where you can really just give it to God. And that is such a beautiful ordering. Thank you for that practical advice.
Sure. Yes. I think my spiritual director probably shared that with me, of just this idea of setting the tone for your day. And, she kind of encouraged me to ask the Lord, what 3 things would you have me do today? And so then it's not like, here are the 20 things on my list, and you could write all those things down. But just because that's what you have doesn't mean that's what God wants you to do. We really have to have a sense of giving every aspect of our life to the Holy Spirit. And being willing to hear what he has to say. And I think, when we give that to him, I'm sorry.
This is our life.
This is real life. About this. I know. You got to go. I love you. You got to wait a few more minutes. That, then he will bring us peace, because we're doing what he wants us to do instead of the things we think we need to do. And I think it goes back to, really just this concept of giving every area of our life to God, and he cares about all of it, and then we're just walking really in the Spirit, in the Holy Spirit, who God sent us to be with us on earth when he had to go back up to heaven, is like, he's guiding us and he cares about all of it. So that we get out of this habit of a compartmentalized spirituality. It's like, I have this prayer time and I go to mass or I go to adoration, and that God, and those are awesome things too, but he wants to be a part of all the things, you know, and it's not like a mental illness obsessive, like I got to pray before I order at Chick-fil-A kind of a thing. You know, it's like, you know, Lord, I trust that what I'm doing now is what you want me to be doing. Guide me and be in the center of it.
Yes, amen. And I love that in your book too, you had this idea of a Sabbath approach, and you had mentioned earlier this crazy season, this Corona tide that we're still in. Yes. I don't know if we're ever going to get out of it. But that oftentimes I loved your explanation of how your family celebrates the Lord's Day. But then just this idea of a Sabbath approach, and I think that's kind of what this season is allowing for all of us. It is an unnatural editing of our lives, like you know that I mean we kind of did just like drop things that you know were in the air and all the balls came tumbling down, but then we didn't have to pick them back up immediately, and we still don't really have to pick a lot of them up, and I think that is reordering as well.
Yeah, and I love that it's given us all a chance to really consider what we want to do, and I think that's kind of this concept of Sabbath, like. You clear off the calendar. You are not sort of dictated to go here, do this, you know, and really nobody controls that but us. But I think we all get in the habit of allowing ourselves to be told where to go. And so Sabbath is like the one day of the week where you're like, I am going to be deliberate with my time today. What do I want to do that's going to refresh me, bless my family, help us, you know, feel more connected, help me to feel more connected to God. And that's what we've had for the last 6 weeks. And like you say, it isn't it's unnatural. But what I have been considering is like this idea of like, how now shall we live? And I was explaining this to some friends. And I said, I know it sounds melodramatic, but I feel melodramatic right now. You know, like I want to keep what's wonderful about this and not go back to the status quo just because that's what we're doing. You know, like when I was asking my kids what they love about this time, one of my boys said the prayer. And it's like, because we have so much time, we're taking the time to spend time in prayer. Like we're starting the day with morning office. We're and it's all quick, none of it's long and drawn out, but you know, it's being aware of the time we have and really using it wisely, you know, and having lots of fun in the midst of it too, but just kind of being smart about it. And again, I know, you know, like I don't homeschool. And so when life goes back to normal, we won't stop at 10 a.m. and do any kind of prayer. But, you know, asking God to kind of show us like the things that we realized in this season, show me how to continue that.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that, you know, like now we know what we can live without and what we can't live without. And I've always tried to be really intentional about our family's schedule and not doing too many activities, like pick something you love and let's do it. But you know, because in this day and age, you can't dance, swim, you know, ride horses. It's like, if you're going to ride horses, you need to ride horses every single day. 3 hours every evening, competitions on the weekends. Yes. And the same thing with dance. When I was growing up, I kind of did everything, but it was like one day. And then
nothing
you had your weekends.
Recreational. We're all professionals.
No, exactly. And so I've got 3 daughters, and my youngest dances, and you know, we missed all of our kind of spring competitions. We're missing our dance recital, and they've announced that they're opening the studio back up in June, and hopefully doing the dance recital in the fall. And we're kind of going, is this what we want to do? We've kind of enjoyed not having to do it. I mean, she loves dance, and we love dance, and it's been a part of her life, you know, for the last several years. But we're making hard decisions of like, let's really think about it, because probably once we stop doing it, it won't be something we can just jump back in, because she's on the pre-competition squad and yada, yada, yada. And so it is like there's a lot of deliberate decisions that I think hopefully a lot of families are about to make.
Yeah. And I think that is such a wonderful gift of this time. Is like, it's not that we're saying, you know, all that stuff's bad and we're just going to sit at home now and, you know, Little House on the Prairie and we never leave the homestead.
That's okay too.
and that's great. But, you know, it's like really considering, you know, and I write about this in the book, you know, when our oldest son, Ethan, was like 4, I was feeling all this pressure for him to play soccer. And at that point I was pregnant, I think, with my 4th baby. Maybe Ethan was 5 at that point. And my husband, who's like a few years older than I am, was like, I didn't start playing sports till I was like 8 or 9. This 4-year-old, 5-year-old thing is ridiculous. I was like, we got to do it. He's going to be behind. It was a disaster. You know, it was like, I was like hugely pregnant, chasing a 1-year-old, never saw the first game. The kids didn't even know they were in a soccer game. It was ridiculous. You know, the players themselves, they were just
they were looking at bugs. That's all they did.
Airplanes.
Yeah. And it's like, I was such a great example of getting caught up in some kind of frenzy set by somebody. You know, and after that, we didn't go back to sports for like 5 or 6 years. And it was great. My boys all ended up, you know, doing just fine athletically, you know. And then here's the thing that's really interesting. And I think, you know, parents really have to consider this. What do I want to invest in? I mean, I have lots of friends who've had kids play college sports, and that's great. I've known people whose kids go, and after 1 year, they're like, this is totally consuming. I don't want to do it. Like, we really have to have the freedom to do what we want, what works best for our family, but never to feel motivated by fear. And that's totally what I was motivated by, is like a fear of my kids getting left behind in some particular arena that was just, you know, you blink and they grow up and then it all works out, you know, like it's just going to be okay. You know,
I think it's fear and it's comparison, because we're constantly looking around going like, what are these people, like they have it together. And so what are they doing? I probably need to do that. But if my mother has taught me anything, it's never compare your insides to somebody else's outsides. Like, you don't know what their life is on the inside. It might look calm. The waters might be still, but there is like a torrent underneath that you don't want. You do not want that. So don't, I mean, that fear and that comparison is something that I think is in constant attack. Well, it's constantly attacking us, and we have to like figure out ways to get through, especially those hard times. And I wanted to jump in back to your book, because it is. I mean, y'all, seriously, I can never lend this book to anybody because I've underlined it. I have notes. I have things written in the margins that no one else should know about. But it's so full of practical advice and tips, and you organized it that way because you are organized. But also on one page, on page 50, I think, and 51, you have 3 tips for how to get through hard times. And I know that we're running up on time with you today, but I want to share these, if you don't mind, because I feel like this is a takeaway that everybody watching is going to gobble up, because they're so good and they're so true. And so the first one you say is, when you are, you know, in a difficult season, it might be a matter of weeks or months or years, whatever. You had very clear tips or goals for people. And number 1 was lower your expectations. Tell me what that means.
So, you know, quit trying to, in a hard season, whether you have a newborn, whether you're investing in going back to school, you know, with your kids in school, starting a new job, you know, just anything kind of difficult in your life, is to not try to do things the way you always do it. It's okay to say, in this next season, we're going to eat really basic meals. I'm not going to cook things that take a lot of time. Or, you know, I know when I had Henry and Isabel, and they were both little, and by then all my big boys were playing sports, and I was killing myself trying to go to all these games. And I remember Paul saying, because I guess they were all playing like, you know, middle school basketball and soccer. And it's one thing to go to soccer games. Basketball games are just terrible to have little kids at. You're up in the
loud.
You know, it's loud. They want to crawl into the bleachers, and, you know, and Paul said, don't feel like you have to come. And it's like, I had put this incredible pressure on myself to be all things to my kids. You know, if I'm not there, that's just not, they were totally okay with me not being there, you know, and it sounds silly now, but that, like, I really had to get permission almost from myself through my husband to say, you can't do this. It's wearing you out to do this, you know? So and I think I'm a, you know, big believer in really self-awareness and considering, as I think about my day, what are the things that feel like a pinch? What robs me of my joy? What is the thing that's stressing me out? Is that negotiable? Sometimes it's not. You know, getting your kids to school every morning can be stressful. It's non-negotiable. You know, so then I say, if it's non-negotiable, let's figure out how to streamline that. You know, like for years, I made the lunches the night before, because getting up in the morning and trying to make lunches, you know, it's like, you make sure the uniforms are clean. You make sure the lunches are made. Does that sound over the top? Kind of, but it totally saved me, you know? So it's like being aware of what you can't get rid of, and then lowering your expectations in a lot of other areas. And I mentioned in the book, I have a friend who's working on her PhD, and she's just like, this is an intense, like 2-year commitment. I'm not going to be training for a marathon right now or going to the gym 5 days a week. You know, it's like, be kind to yourself and, you know, with all of that stuff.
Lower the expectations is the family mantra. It's my motherhood mantra. And so I feel very validated that you have this in your book, because I've always said, like, when we adopted our daughters, and so when we first got them, I wanted them to have the best birthday parties. I mean, I'd order the M&Ms with their little faces on it, you know, for the party favors, and the party favors were over the top. And about a couple, you know, I did that for probably 2 or 3 years. So that's like 9 over the top birthdays. And I was like, this is crazy. I'm killing myself. Yeah. I'm not enjoying their birthday parties. Now it is fun to look back on the pictures and be like, I did that. That was pretty fun. But I realized, like, okay, then the next year you would kind of expect something even better. And so I feel like when the bar is so high, when you set it and that's your baseline, that you have to keep performing and keep performing. And so I just kind of said, like, all right, kids, mom needs a break. And so I did. And I had another mom at one of the kids' school that was like, I'm the president of the OK Moms Club. Like,
yes,
it's okay to be okay. You don't have to be the best at everything.
And I think that ties back nicely to this idea of not comparing, because then you have the freedom to do what works best for your family. You know, like, do what works best for you. Don't compare. Don't be looking around to see who's doing other things, and really learning to be okay with that, you know. And it's a big step, you know. Kind of, we were joking about having bigger kids, and then, you know, sometimes when you're dealing with parents who their oldest is maybe the age of your youngest, you're in a different season, and learning to be okay that they have really strong, solid opinions about things that you don't necessarily, maybe, you know, or like they've got the cell phone plan all figured out and you feel like you're trying to figure it out in the midst of it, you know. And that can be hard on your pride too, sometimes, to say, I don't know, we're not doing it as perfectly as I would like. And we're trying our best, you know, and it's all right. Ask Henry to help you.
So, Rachel, as we close up, I have one more question for you. And this is something that is particularly important to Tracy and I, as we are trying to sort of build Bellator Catholic Media, Bellator Society, and some of the things that we have run into over the past year and a half of doing this new kind of thing is this weird, and I don't think it's just about social media or Catholic media or anything like that, but like, it's the human condition of this turfiness and this comparison and this competition among us, when we should all be facing the same direction, especially if we have these, you know, this Christian ethic of serving the Lord and really looking for our own Calcuttas. I know that you know, have a special devotion to Mother Teresa, so that might resonate with you. How do we avoid that? How do you, not we, how do you, and or do you, like, how does that affect you? Because, like, we've had so many instances where people were like, we're doing the same thing as you are, you know, do you mind coming on our live stream? And they're like, yeah, no. And it's like, oh, I didn't even, like, what is your experience there?
You know,
you don't have to give too much.
Yeah, no, it can be hard. It can be really tough when you feel like you're being slighted or you're, you know, there's a I do not like competition. I mean, I would like for us to all be one big happy family, and we're all moving each other forward and encouraging each other. And it doesn't always feel that way. And I know sometimes I probably maybe, you know, when I'm feeling insecure, I might not give off that vibe either. You know, at the end of the day, I always think, and I know this is overly simplistic, but I know it's the truth, is a priest friend of mine who said, holiness will solve all your problems, you know. And it's like, in those moments when I feel slighted, when I feel judged, when I feel insecure or rejected, is like, you know, being aware of what those feelings are and not dwelling on them, though, and going back to put my focus back on Jesus, trust that he will direct my steps, you know. And that's why I kind of do feel so passionate about this. The last 2 books I've written have just been these super practical books, because I think a lot about the fact that, you know, God created us to know him, and our hearts won't rest until they rest in him, but he also gave us a vocation. So it's like, I'm a wife and a mom, and I clean bathrooms and clean a kitchen. And what does that have to do with me being holy? You know, how can what Mother Teresa did, how does that apply to me? And it's not mutually exclusive. It looks different, but it really is like, God wants us to be constantly inviting him back into the center of all the things we do. And that's where we find the peace, you know. And I think I'm all for reading books, knowing yourself, and so again, I know that's overly simplistic, but at the end of the day, that's where the answers lie. It's like, what would Jesus have me do? How do I let go of these things that I hold so tightly to? And that's where we get real freedom and peace.
Amen. Preach it.
Thank you so much for joining us. I think we're going to have you back because I feel a little cheated. I feel a little slighted with Facebook and the glitches we had earlier, because I think we could talk about this a lot longer than the little amount of time that we actually got to visit with you.
Yeah, thank you. I would love to be back on again today. And I'm sorry I can't stay on here longer.
No.
It was so fun chatting with you ladies.
Absolutely.
Everybody needs to go buy this book, Overcommitted, Cut Chaos and Find Balance by Rachel Balducci. Thank you. Rachel.
Yes.
Bye. Ladies, thank y'all so much. It was so fun being here.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.